Do another film one of these, so I'm going to look at my top 10 horror films. So as usual, what I'll do is a bit of a little preamble, and I'll just talk about the ones that didn't make the cut. Yeah, first lot was really Amicus films. So I love portmanteau horror that the Amicus company did back in the late 60s and early 70s. If anyone who's not aware, basically Amicus were like Hammer. They were a British company but run by an American guy called Milton Subotsky. And they specialised in doing portmanteau horror, so they'll have 4 stories or 5 stories in one film. And then, you know, they would have actors like Peter Cushing in and so forth. So there's several, they did 7. There's I'm just looking on my computer screen here. There's Dr. Terror's House of Horrors, Torture Garden, The House That Dripped Blood, Tales from the Crypt, Asylum, Vault of Horror. So those were 6 of them, and the last one they did, now it says 1974 here, but I think it's 73, was From Beyond the Grave, and that's my favourite. That's a brilliant one with Peter Cushing. He plays an antique shop owner, and people come in and buy an object from his shop, but usually they try and do him out of paying the full amount for the article they bought, or if someone even steals something, and they get punished for this, and we see what happens to them back at home. The opening story on his one is a great one with David Warner in it. He'll be making an appearance later. He buys a mirror. It has a spirit trapped in the mirror that demands blood. It gets in Warner's head. He starts murdering people. Eventually the spirit is given power. It comes out of the mirror, kills him. That's the end of Warner, or so you think, but at the end a new couple move into the house, and then David Warner appears at the mirror. There's another really good one with Ian Ogilvy as well. He'll be making an appearance later. With Leslie Ann Down, top 70s lady. That's a really good one. He's paid the full amount and he's been really good, so he gets away. But there's a great, Peter Cushing's great in it. His top line in it is naughty, shouldn't have done that. So I'd love to have put that in there. There was just looking at it. I'll explain why that didn't make the cut in a sec. Obviously Psycho, classic Alfred Hitchcock film, really massively influential. It's just like kind of slasher films I generally prefer. You'll see one later. And there's other Hitchcock films I prefer. But if I was going to tie that in with the Italian Hitchcock, Dario Argento, again, a couple of his films that were serious consideration with Deep Red, which is very much in this kind of slasher vein, and Suspiria. I think what stopped me putting those in is they look stunning. They've got great death concepts, as it were, but sometimes the acting and plotting's a bit haywire. If you're interested in Deep Red, there's 2 cuts of that, and there's one which is a shorter cut, and I think that's better. There's one which has more silly humour bits in it, but if you're not seeing Dario Argento, his debut film Bird with a Crystal Plumage is very good. Deep Red, Suspiria, and his 1982 from Tenebrae is pretty cool as well. Then there's The Exorcist, all-time classic, again, proper high-end Hollywood director approaching the horror genre very seriously. The opening of the film's amazing, and the way it builds is just weird. Its pacing's very 1970s. It's not like a typical horror film. The acting's great. It's got one of the most iconic images in all cinema. It's probably not a film I enjoy as much. I think that's the thing with that, but a huge film in its day. Then the Dead films, Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead. Always loved Day of the Dead, but I think Dawn of the Dead's the classic. I actually really love the remake of this by Zack Snyder from 2004, I think. The opening of that film, if you've not seen the remake of Dawn of the Dead, it's absolutely brilliant. It has a pre-credit sequence and then an awesome credits over a Johnny Cash song with great graphics, and it's the lost art of the credit sequence, I put it up there with the credit scenes for 7 or something like that. It's really good. So that was a close one, great satire on consumerism, Obviously everyone can't wait to get back to the shops, because, that's all the stuff in there that we need. It's there, isn't it? 28 Days Later, another zombie one. 28 Weeks Later is pretty good as well, but 28 Days Later, modern classic. Driving around recently or walking in deserted streets, it will give you that vibe when Cillian Murphy wakes up and he's in the streets of London deserted. What we've experienced recently has a sense of apocalypse about it. Then another one I had was the 1978 version of Invasion of the Body Snatchers with Donald Sutherland and Leonard Nimoy being a villain. Obviously the 1956 version, people tend to see it as a Reds Under the Beds film and the fear of being assimilated, and the loss of identity, communism being assimilated into one, as it were, as opposed to the American capitalism. But the remake plays on the same ideas, but it comes at a time of the era of the paranoid conspiracy thriller. It's a late one, but it fits more into that Watergate or post-Watergate era where people aren't sure, what's what. It's probably a bit out of its time. I think it might be set in Canada, actually. I'm not sure, but it's really great. The end of that film's brilliant. There's a horrific image of the dog that's crossed with a human, which I just can't get out of my head. Another one is Rosemary's Baby. I'm just highlighting something to remind me. Rosemary's Baby, Polanski's classic 1968 horror. Probably the first, or one of the first, expensive studio horrors with, top actors and a top director. So Polanski made another classic horror in 1965, Repulsion, with Catherine Deneuve. That's a brilliant film. Again, that would have been, one that made the list. It's got an incredible ending, a close-up on a photograph, which was used later by another film, which tells you why everything that's happened, really. It's absolute genius. But Rosemary's Baby, brilliant performance by Mia Farrow, should have won the Oscar, wasn't even nominated. John Cassavetes, one of my first introductions to the great John Cassavetes. I'll tell you a little story about this film quickly. There's a great film called Painting with Light, which is a documentary on cinematography. And the guy who shot Rosemary's Baby was called William A. Fraker, very well-known cinematographer at the time. And basically, he was lining up a shot where Ruth Gordon, the character played by Ruth Gordon, she won the Oscar, actually. She's basically sat in the bedroom having a conversation. So he lined up the shot in the doorway. And Polanski came to look at the shot, and Fraker had just lined it sort of dead on. And Polanski was like, no, I don't want it like that. And he moved the camera sideways. So kind of, you could only see half the door. And Fraker was like, well, what's he doing that for? Anyway, when Fraker went to see the film of the pictures, that sequence came up and all the audience leaned that way. And that's the brilliance of directors. They tell stories visually and they know what works. So all of the audience wanted to peer around the corner. I love that. So Rosemary's Baby is quite a funny sort of dark satire. Recently there was a film called Hereditary, which, that was brilliant for the first 45 minutes, and then it went a bit bonkers, but you could see that was influenced by Rosemary's Baby. I think where it went wrong, it didn't quite get the sort of black humour. I could see what it was going for at the end. I went at the pictures and there was people laughing and going, what the fuck is this? But the guy did a film called Midsommar afterwards as well, and that's interesting. Again, the guy's directed that, his name escapes me, but he's one to watch anyway. I've just remembered a couple of other ones, good one, I've got that in there. And another one was Dead Zone. Obviously David Cronenberg's a great horror filmmaker in his early days, and The Fly's another classic. But the Dead Zone's one that's always stayed with me. Cronenberg deals with body horror, but the horror with this is what's happened to Christopher Walken's mind. Basically, he has a car accident, he wakes up, his life's over. So it's that horrible thing, he's got his life back, he's come out of his coma, but his girlfriend at the time is remarried. He's got physical injury still, but he also has the foresight to seeing things, so he can see what his life might have been, but it isn't. But he can also see the future. I think it's really poignant. It's got a lovely credit sequence and a beautiful score by Howard Shore. But it's the first Cronenberg film where the acting's really top notch. Walken, Brooke Adams, Martin Sheen. So not as horrific as Cronenberg's other films, but a really, really good one for me. And that's part of what called psychic horror. People with the mind. Scanners would be an example there as well by Cronenberg. And another one I like is Brian De Palma's Fury from 1978, also with John Cassavetes. Because it gets exploded at the end, brilliant. A few modern classics now. One I think is a modern classic. It seems to have tailed off. The guy who did the remake of Hellboy recently after being going into TV, doing Game of Thrones. But his second film, it's I can't remember his name now, sorry, but anyway, it's The Descent. Neil Marshall, apologies. So The Descent is where a group of girls go caving and they get stuck deep underground and there's horrible creatures in the cave, and it's really, really superb. I mean, you can barely see the creatures. It plays on that real fear of darkness, but mostly claustrophobia. There's a bit where a character's trapped in a small tunnel, and I had to look away at the cinema. That's something that is really horrific for me. It's really interesting with the female cast, what happens. Was really great. You know, he made a really funny werewolf film before that, Dog Soldiers. And then there's a couple of good genre films. There was Doomsday, which people slag, but it was quite a good film, Mad Max, and then Centurion with Michael Fassbender. But it just didn't quite work out for him. And like I say, he's come back with Hellboy, but that hasn't worked out. But The Descent is a classic. I once saw him on the train, actually, to Carlisle. I think he's from Cumbria. The other two modern classics came out at the same time. Well, modern-ish, 20 years ago now, but basically there was the rise of Japanese horror. Films like The Grudge, The Eye, all got remade by Hollywood, but the ultimate classic, the absolute classic, was the first Ring. If you've never seen the Japanese version of The Ring, the ending is... I saw the pictures and it just sent shivers down my spine. It was chilling. I'm looking at it now, actually, it's unlucky not to be in the top 10. And it makes use of the video as like ancient technology. The young people in it are already kind of involved in the internet. I mean, it's 20 years ago, but they've got mobile phones, compact discs. The video's like the old dark technology. At the same time, Mike Takeshi's at Takashi Milk. He does loads of films, and he did a film called Audition. And that's just a weird horror, slightly David Lynch-ish. And the end's just terrific. You'll never look at Cheese Wire the same way again. So there's that one. The final one that didn't make the cut, and this should be in there, it's one of my all-time faves, but it's a TV film. And it's the... okay, so you've got a few horror films that are actually TV films. I'm just writing something down here. I'll just quickly... that are TV films like Something Evil... from the early 70s, was actually directed by Steven Spielberg, and then there's one called Don't Be Afraid of the Dark, and that was remade by well, I don't know who the director was. Del Toro produced it, and it was the Guy Pearce starred in it. But a great TV movie is Salem's Lot from 1979. Tobe Hooper directed it. I just love that film so much. Anyone who saw it at the time on TV will remember the absolute terror of the master, the brilliance of James Mason. And over 2 nights, whenever I saw it, you know, I think I saw it in the second run, 3-hour version, it's just superb. And David Soul's great, Ken Hutch from Starsky and Hutch. It uses the original Nosferatu makeup for the vampire. And that's another one to mention, is Murnau's Nosferatu. You know, whenever you see a still from that, even if you don't know a lot about film or silent film, which I don't really, you'd know that was Nosferatu. So, you know, that image is going back all those years. But yeah, there's an edited version of Salem's Lot, for 2-hour one. But watch the 3-hour one. The most chilling image is when the little kid comes back and he floats. It was the first time I saw vampires float, and he floats up at the window, and the concept of them having to be invited in. And that's another great one. Another weird one that's just come to me, weird horror, psychological horror thriller, is a film called The Other from 1972, I think it is. It's by a director called Robert Mulligan. He directed, what's it called? To Kill a Mockingbird. So he directed To Kill a Mockingbird. He was pretty successful in the 60s. He made this very strange film with twins, set in rural America. I'd never heard of it before, and then I've rented it a couple of times. First I ordered it through Tesco all those years ago when we used to do that, and then I got it from a library. But it's called The Other. Check it out. It's just, again, it's got like kind of psychic thing in it as well, but it's just a strange film. It's got one of those great atmospheres, Southern Gothic I'd call it. Yeah, I think that's the kind of the preamble there. Those are the kind of films that I considered on this list. Forget writing down, and it was just some I'd forgotten to put on the list. So let's get to it. Okay, so the reason I didn't put From Beyond the Grave, Amicus, in there at 10 was because I thought, really, when it comes to the crunch, Hammer Horror's got to make it. It's got to make the list. So the Hammer horror films that I really, really like are Plague of the Zombies from 1966, Hands of the Ripper, 1971. My favourite Frankenstein film, which is actually, I think it's the fifth one, Frankenstein Must Be Destroyed. If you've not seen that, it's superb. It's really, really good. And that was close to making the cut. And the Quatermass and the Pit's another great one from 1967. So they're the good ones, along with the original Dracula and Frankenstein. In actual fact, just quickly on Dracula, the 1979 version of Dracula is my favourite. That's the one with Frank Langella, directed by John Badham. It's never on TV now, I don't know why, but it's really, really good. Brilliant score by John Williams. Okay, so my choice is 1968's The Devil Rides Out. So this is based on the Dennis Wheatley novel. Dennis Wheatley is a horror novelist, and that's where Geezer Butler got the name Black Sabbath from, I think. Or there was a film called Black Sabbath by Mario Bava. Yeah, it's great. It basically takes its subject matter seriously. You've got Christopher Lee on hero mode, not playing the villain. He's basically a guy who's a cult historian, and Charles Gray plays an Aleister Crowley type figure. So another film that touches on the Aleister Crowley figure is Night of the Demon from 1957. That's another really good one. I think the problem with that is it shows the demon too quickly. But Aleister Crowley is obviously a British occultist, loved by Jimmy Page and lionised in the famous Ozzy Osbourne song. Basically, he starts messing with this girl's mind. Patrick Mower's in it, he of Target and Emmerdale Farm fame, top 70s act and top episode of The Sweeney where he plays an Australian. It's really good. The climax is really good. They have to do a circle on the floor and then various demons and images. And it's got one of my favourite images in whole horror. Basically, the goat of Mendes. And Christopher Lee goes, "The goat of Mendes, the devil himself." It's absolutely brilliant. And Terence Fisher directed this. So Terence Fisher's the great Hammer director. He directed more Hammer films than anyone else, but a lot of the classic ones are directed by him. And there's a good argument that Fisher's should have, his career should be looked at more deeply. Okay, so the second one, we've got to have a ghost story, and this is number 9, sorry. And the one I've gone for, a couple that I was interested in putting in is The Haunting from 1963, Robert Wise's classic adaptation of The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. Fantastic photography on that. And production design, and also The Others, which this next film most resembles, the Nicole Kidman one, which is really good. The only thing with that is once you know the twist, it kind of it's less satisfying to watch, I think. But I'm going for 1961's The Innocents. So this is an adaptation by Jack Clayton of The Turn of the Screw by Henry James, and it stars the Oscar-nominated Deborah Carr. It's got Peter Wingard in it of Flash Gordon fame. The photography by Freddie Francis, black and white, is absolutely superb. So what's great about this is you basically have a governess coming in, what we call a nanny now, I suppose, to take care of a couple of kids. But something's happened with the previous nanny, Miss Jessel. But the whole ambiguity of the film is what's happening in the governess's head, or is it really happened? And the argument is she's suffering from some kind of repressed sexual hysteria. The previous governess, Miss Jessel, had an affair or something with the gardener, which I can't remember the name of that character. But it's kind of playing off the two, governesses, as it were. And she's also had a strange relationship with the kids, particularly the young boy. But it's great, and it's got one of the most spooky images in all film. It's daylight, and basically it's looking across a lake or pond, big pond, and there's a woman just kind of stood in the reeds on the other side of the pond, a bit like Black Sabbath's debut album cover, and it's just really chilling. The acting's great, the photography's amazing. See this film, it's an absolute classic. Okay, number 8, I'm going for something from the folk horror cycle. So the term folk horror was only recently coined by Mark Gatiss in his documentary, 3-part documentary on horror. And there's one other film that he picks out from the folk horror genre is Blood on Satan's Claw. Recently it's made a bit of a comeback with Wakewood and The Hallows. So what is folk horror? Typically I would say it's where the horror comes from nature and pagan pagan beliefs, and it will be set in the countryside in rural England. And of course it's The Wicker Man from 1973. First saw this film about 1986, I think. And it was and still is one of the strangest films ever made. It's got a weird folk score written for the film. Basically, Edward Woodward arrives at an island to investigate the disappearance of a girl. But this island has its own rules and ways. Basically, they're pagans. And that's what it is. It's about religious fundamentalism. Woodward is a Christian and a virgin still, and he believes his thing. Christopher Lee's a lot, the Lord Summersby, Summerall, is it? Sorry, he is, they're pagans, and they follow those beliefs. I'll not spoil the ending for you if you've not seen it, but basically, it kind of, in the world we live in, it kind of puts over that kind of logic that's in a fundamentalist mind. And at the end there's kind of that battle really between the two ideologies. But it's the guy only made, Robin Hardy, the guy directed it, only made 2 other films, I think. But The Wicker Man, it's an all-time classic. If you can get the extended cut, that's got the other bits in it. Okay, number 7. Gonna go for classic slasher film, the classic slasher film of 1978, Halloween, John Carpenter. So amazing, this got an incredible score written by him in 5/4 time for the Musos. Brilliant killer who just can't be stopped. Almost supernatural. Later on he is supernatural really. Great shot compositions, widescreen. You've got the knife just in the edge of the frame. Chilling deaths, tension. Just all the elements, and a great performance by Donald Pleasence. Donald Pleasence often plays like the villain in horror films, but in this he's the good guy, and he plays the savant character. So in horror films there'll be a patriarchal older figure, usually generally male, and they're the savant. They basically know what's going on. If it's the occult, they'll know about the occult. If it's vampires like Van Helsing, they'll know how to kill a vampire, and he knows what goes on in Michael's mind, and he knows how dangerous he is. Got a great ending, the guy just disappearing, and then that theme kicks in. Just a stunning achievement. I think it's the first film on this list where it's kind of like, this really is absolutely spot on. Okay, I'm going to quickly get to number 6, so I can see clocks ring out. We might have to do 2 parts in this, but number 6 I'm going for this. You recognise that, it's the carpet from The Shining. So this is the first film here on the list where you've got a massively heavy-hitting director coming in. It's the only horror film he made, the great Stanley Kubrick. When I first saw this film, it didn't do it for me, and I still don't find it scary, I must say that. But the thing is, it's just so well made. The production design of the Overlook Hotel, stunning. It makes incredible use of the Steadicam, so Kubrick got in touch with a guy called Garrett Brown, who'd invented the Steadicam. He'd worked on a couple of films, Rocky and Bound for Glory, using it, but Kubrick was able to work with him and get the angle of the camera different, so you get those low shots when Danny's riding along and you get this hypnotic sound of the carpet and the floor changing. I think it's interesting being locked down because it's about how boredom sends someone insane. But in reality, Danny as a child, he's quite happy. He's got this whole playground to play in, but obviously he's got evil spirits. I think Jack Nicholson's already mad when he's driving along in the car. But the main thing with the Jack Torrance character, he doesn't have a book in him. He never did. And that's the thing. And in the back of his mind, he knows that. And when he gets there, it's not within him and it sends him over the edge. He's already losing it. Great image of the 2 girls, the 2 twins. That's one iconic image. And also the blood coming through the lift shaft. Again, it's that thing. The great directors have that ability to paint in images and show through the images the horror and communicate what they want to. Amazing film, and one I continue to watch to this day. If you've not seen the documentary Room 237, that's really interesting on The Shining. Okay, I'm going to stop the vid there and we'll do part 2 soon. Cheers.